The entertaining Talkin' Sports.
What is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video, and in this video I'm going to dive into the NFC East, kind of talk about the playoff race as things have changed off of yesterday. Of course, the New York Giants were on a bye, and we sat back, we relaxed, we enjoyed the show. I streamed the Eagles game on my channel, and that's where my primary focus was, being that if the Philadelphia Eagles were to win that game, they would have had a commanding lead in the division. They came in at 3-5-1. Had they won, they would have been 4-5-1, essentially having a 2-game lead with 6 games to play, which would have been a huge lead. Now the Eagles lost, and they have a very challenging schedule coming up. So with that loss yesterday, you could actually argue, when you look at the remaining schedule for some of these other teams and the way that the Philadelphia Eagles are playing, that they may have the least chance to make the playoffs. And in this video, I'll go over all the tiebreaker scenarios. Now, a lot of people on Twitter asked me on Thanksgiving, now that both Washington and Dallas won, which of course was very bad news for the New York Giants yesterday, who are you rooting for on the Thanksgiving game? And my answer is, you could argue both ways, and I'll explain so in this video. Of course, we own the tiebreaker against Washington, so some may argue that you should be rooting for Washington to win. Plus, Washington has probably a little bit more challenging of a schedule than Dallas does going forward. Dallas has a pretty easy schedule, but on the other end of the spectrum, what you could argue is, even if Dallas were to have a 1-game lead on the Giants going into the last game of the season, we play Dallas, and if we were to beat Dallas, we would own the tiebreaker against them. And I don't think anybody would argue, if the New York Giants are going to the playoffs, they are going to have to beat Dallas that last game of the season. So you can really argue both ways. My answer is, enjoy the food and just watch football, because in the end, it's not gonna matter that much. The Giants are gonna have to win at least 6, if not 7 games, regardless of who is in the race. But let's take a look at the remaining schedule for all of these teams. First, we're gonna look at the standings, and it's almost like we started from scratch. Yes, the Eagles have a half-game lead because they tied against the Bengals, but outside of that, it's dead even between the New York Giants, the Dallas Cowboys, and the Washington football team. Dallas and the Giants right now, heads up. Dallas, of course, would own the tiebreaker because they beat us heads up. We swept Washington if we were to tie right now. But it really doesn't matter right now. What matters is at the end of the season. And what the main tiebreaker will be, if the Giants are able to beat Dallas, and like I said, we're not going to the playoffs if we don't beat Dallas, will be that divisional record on the far right side, where the Giants right now stand at 3-2. They've played all of their division games outside of the Dallas game. So even if Dallas were to win their 2 upcoming divisional games, they would still have the same divisional record, meaning if Dallas even had a 1-game lead on the New York Giants going into Week 17, and the Giants were to beat them, the Giants would jump Dallas potentially for first place. Now, the way the Eagles look right now, I don't think they're going to do much, but we're going to jump into everybody's schedule. I'm not really worried about the Eagles. They look completely banged up. We're going to start with the New York Giants, and I did this in my last video. Now Burrow went down at Cincinnati. There is no excuse for the New York Giants not to go out there and win that football game. And I know we've got a number of players with the virus that may not be playing that could definitely have a high impact on the result of that game. Especially players like Caden Smith, who has helped us dramatically in the H-back role as a lead blocker. Of course, Graham Gano has been maybe our best player on defense, and Riley Dixon, who was fantastic last week, flipping the field position. So we'll see if they're able to suit up for that game. That's not going to help. But with Joe Burrow going down for the Cincinnati Bengals and Ryan Finley stepping in, he's not the same quarterback. Not to mention Joe Mixon, I believe, will be out for this contest as well. The Giants have no excuses not to go out there and win that game. And if they win that game, they will be tied for first place if the Eagles are to lose this week against Seattle, because obviously either Dallas or Washington will win that football game, and the winner of that and the New York Giants, if the Eagles were to lose, which I think most of us probably expect at this point, seeing as the way that they've played, the Giants and the winner of the Thanksgiving game will be tied for first with 5 games remaining. And then when you look at the rest of the Giants' remaining schedule, it doesn't get very easy after that. We have 4 very, very challenging games in which we're going to have to win at least 1 to even have a prayer going into that last game. But like I said, even if Dallas has 6 wins going into the last week, they have 3 right now. So to be able to do that, they'd have to go 3-2 over the next 5 contests. Even if they were to have that and had a 1-game lead, the Giants and them would be essentially tied, because a win against Dallas the last week with them both going 6-10, the Giants would get in. But there's no doubt about it, at a bare minimum, to have any possibility at the playoffs, the Giants would have to beat Cincinnati and win 1 out of the next 4. And if you ask me, they're probably going to have to win 2 out of those 4 between Seattle, Arizona, Cleveland, and Baltimore. Baltimore is definitely showing signs of regression, so maybe that game isn't as impossible as we once thought. Cleveland, to me, it's simple to say how to beat that team. It's not easy. They don't have the best of defenses. Yesterday it looked good. Granted, it was in the rain. Granted, Philadelphia hasn't looked that good. They were able to run on them. The Eagles kind of just got away from the run. But you look at Cleveland's defensive numbers this year, they don't really scare me. I know Garrett didn't play in that game, and he will be a handful. The key to beating Cleveland is stopping that run, and it will not be easy with that strong offensive line. Arizona, of course, we know they've got a high-flying offense. The defense, you could definitely move the ball on, so it'll come down to ball control, and the same could be said for Seattle. But it's one game at a time for the New York Giants, and if they don't beat Cincinnati, in my opinion, talking from a playoff perspective, none of it matters after that. We don't have a possibility at the playoffs, in my opinion, if we lose that Cincinnati Bengals game. Next up, we've got this is the Philadelphia Eagles schedule. And right now, the Eagles, you still have to talk about them. They sit atop the division at 3-6-1. But look at this schedule, and you tell me where the wins are coming from, seeing the way that this team has played as of late. Seattle home, I doubt it. You never know. At Green Bay, Green Bay has not played great against good teams, but Philadelphia is not a good team right now. The Saints continue to win football games, and we'll see if Breeze is back by then, but they still have a great all-around team. At Arizona, those next 4 games, at best, in my opinion, you're talking 1-3, which would get them, if they were to win 1, to 4-7-1 with 2 to play. And if they were to sweep both Dallas and Washington, 6-9-1 may actually give them an opportunity to win this division. But they have to win 1 out of those next 4 to even have a possibility. And by the time they get to those Dallas and Washington games, we may actually be rooting for Philadelphia. That's how crazy this division has become. Next up, we're going to talk about the Dallas Cowboys and look at their remaining schedule. And in my opinion, based off of this, looking at their schedule, you may be rooting for Washington in that football game, even though we have a 1-game buffer against Dallas, being that we would control our own destiny the last game of the year, even if they had that 1-game lead. They play Washington this week, a game in which the way that Dallas has looked, you have to think they stand a chance to win. At Baltimore suddenly doesn't look impossible for anybody to beat. Obviously, you would favor Baltimore. But then after that, you've got at Cincinnati without Joe Burrow, the 49ers, who don't look near the same as last year, and the Eagles, who look completely lost. They could easily win 4 out of the next 5. And if Dallas wins 4 out of the next 5, well, then you're talking 7 wins and you're talking playoffs. As a Giant fan, you're hoping no better than 3-2. I think that's very possible. And Washington winning on Thanksgiving would go a long way towards doing that. If they were to beat Washington and then beat Baltimore, I would say that overwhelmingly, Dallas would be the favorite to win this division. We're rooting for Washington, in my opinion, on Thanksgiving Day, and here's why. You look at Washington's remaining schedule, it's a bit more challenging. If they were to beat Dallas, they'd have 4 wins. Now remember, we would own the tiebreaker against Washington, being that we beat them heads up twice. So we have a 1-game lead, technically, even if we're tied at 4-7 and 4-7 after this week. So let's just play this out and say we're tied. You have at Pittsburgh, probably going to be a loss. Pittsburgh hasn't lost a game all year, so they're at 4-8. Then at San Francisco, we'll give them a win, 5-8. Seattle, I'm going to give them a loss, 5-9. And then you have 2 winnable games there in which you would have to hope that the Washington football team would split, because it's going to be very hard for the New York Giants to get to 7-9. But that's the way I see it, man. This division is still up for grabs, as crazy as that may sound, and it's not going to get, and I think it's going to come down to the wire. Of course, like in every division, these teams all play each other week 17, and I don't think this division will be decided until then. I'll tell you what, right now, if the Giants are to beat Cincinnati, I'll tell you this, we will be playing meaningful football, in my opinion, down to the wire, because I don't see anybody running away with this division. But when I really thought about it and analyzed it, I would say Washington winning would give us the best opportunity to win this division on Thanksgiving. However, if Dallas wins, it's not the end of the world, because we do technically have a 1-game buffer, being that we own the tiebreaker and we control our own destiny as long as we were able to remain within 1 game of that divisional lead of the Dallas Cowboys. So, enjoy the game on Thursday. Let's go out there. Let's get a win against Cincinnati, and then we could start to seriously think about playoff possibilities with this football team. As always, guys, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe. Drop a comment. Maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.